It's time to dive beneath the surface and into the minds and hearts of your favorite celebrities and pop culture icons. Welcome to Up and Adam.
Hey guys, what's up? You're watching Up and Adam Live. My name's Adam Newell, and today I'm sitting here talking with one of the newest members of the Real Housewives of New York, Elyse Slaine.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm well. Nice to see you in person.
You look great.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to go ahead and jump right in. We've loved seeing you so far on the Real Housewives of New York, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. We just want to get to know you a little bit better.
Terrific.
For those of us who don't know you yet, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Are you from New York?
I am from New York. I grew up out in Long Island in Stony Brook and have been here my entire adult life.
Okay, New York, born and raised.
Born and raised, yes.
All right. You work in cryptocurrency, correct?
Yeah, my background's a Wall Street background. So I started my career as a financial journalist at Reuters, and then I transitioned into bond sales and bond trading at Sandler O'Neill and Cantor Fitzgerald.
Which is amazing.
Thank you. It was a time that women were not in the industry. So I always said one day I'd write a book or a screenplay about what it was like growing up on Wall Street when there were no guidelines or boundaries on what guys can and cannot say or do. But that's maybe for the future. I've always been around Wall Street. And when I left working for a company, I started trading my own money. And then got really excited about cryptocurrencies several years ago. So that's what I do full time.
Wow. When you're not filming with the other housewives and you're not working in cryptocurrency, you're also a mom.
I'm also, well, but my daughter's full grown and out of the house. She has her own apartment in Chelsea and she works for a hedge fund.
Your daughter's name is Nicole, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And how does Nicole feel about you filming the housewives?
I actually gave her veto power over it. So when I first started, I asked her how she felt about it. And I said, if you're not comfortable with it, I just won't do it.
Right.
But she grew up with Avery and she's known Ramona, her whole life. So she thought about it, and knowing me, and I'm pretty chill. So she knew that I wasn't going to partake in the naked in the pool and stuff like that. Although it did look like a lot of fun.
You're not going to throw torches across the...
Yeah, the tiki torch.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy because I think people don't realize how much filming does affect the families and the kids who have to go to school, and you open your lives up to everyone.
Right.
And the Bravo fan network is huge.
Right. And some of them are fabulous and some of them are kind of mean-spirited.
I'm sure you're experiencing all of this right now.
I am.
So aside from being a mom and obviously, you're a powerhouse worker and you're filming, do you have hobbies that you do on your time off?
I do. I love working out. I for a while, I go on and off being addicted to CrossFit. And then I also do kickboxing. And then I kidnap one of the CrossFit trainers and I work out with her one-on-one. So I'm super into weightlifting and fitness.
CrossFit's intense too.
It's when I started doing CrossFit, and that's usually downstairs in a gym, and then I would come up the stairs and I would see people just doing regular workouts with weights, and I would just look at them like, you mere mortals.
You're like, you have no idea. It's
Right.
intense. I tried CrossFit when I was living in New York, and I think I lasted about a month and a half, but doing the upside down wall push-ups, I mean, it's no joke.
No.
It's not 24-hour fitness for sure.
Yeah, no, when I'm in my prime, I can squat my body weight.
Yeah.
And I'm just starting to get back into working out. It took a hiatus.
I think that's all of us. It's unfortunate. It feels great, for the first 2 weeks, we're like, oh, lazy, this is okay.
Right.
But now it's becoming the new norm. We're like, let's kick it back into gear here.
Now I'm like, oh, loser.
Now, since you did film this season, what was your experience like with the other ladies?
It was interesting. It wasn't as much female bonding as I had hoped for. There was more fighting than what makes me comfortable. And that's and I know that some of the people on Twitter or whatever were saying some pretty mean things, saying how I was boring or I was watching paint dry because I wasn't jumping into these fights. But it's really, it's not my nature.
Right.
Which
is a great thing, by the way. That's not right.
I have some great relationships with some of the women, and often I don't say much, right? Like, people have noticed that I'm not saying much, but they never get into my personal life this season. And so I'm always in the group environment, and in the group environment, they end up fighting.
Right.
But I'm also, off on the side and having great talks with Dorinda or Sonia or Ramona or Leah. But, it's only a 60-minute show with commercials and stuff, so viewers don't get to see everything.
Right. Especially,
and they want to see the fights.
Yeah. That's what gets ratings, right?
Right.
Did you expect it to be as hostile of an environment?
I actually did not expect it to be as hostile.
Okay.
Although I've known some of these women for a very long time. I actually had stopped watching after the first season because the fighting put knots in my stomach. But I thought it had mellowed over time, and I know that these women have some real, they have deep friendships amongst themselves. So I thought that would prevail.
Right.
But the fights still happen. They go from 0 to 60.
I think people don't realize you introduced Jill Zarin and Bethenny Frankel, right?
Yes.
And you also knew Sonia, Dorinda, Ramona.
Right, Heather.
So you really just didn't know this season Tinsley and Leah.
Right. And I knew Luann from around. I was never close with Luann, and we never did get close. But I've known her from being, in similar circles and being at the same parties and weddings and things like that.
So you haven't gotten an invite to the cabaret?
Well, she did tell me that I should come see a cabaret. It hadn't happened.
Okay. You had a little bit of a minor fallout with Bethenny, right?
Right.
Did you elaborate on what that was about?
No, I didn't elaborate on it. It's because someone had asked me how she was, and I said that we're not, friends anymore. But I could tell you a little bit about it. It was a very long time ago, toward the end of my first marriage. And I had a very hard time during my separation, and my divorce was one of the most difficult times in my life. And so I had become close with another guy and had started seeing him, and Bethenny and I went to St. Bart's with him. And while I included Bethenny in all of my interactions with him, Bethenny felt like she was sort of left on her own a lot. My feeling was she had a ton of friends down there and was going to parties, and I'm just more mellow in general. And I couldn't really see her point of view. She just felt, I guess, abandoned by me.
Right.
In hindsight, all these years later, and now that I have a more clear head and I'm in a happier place, and I always try to look at disagreements between people as, what part of the responsibility can I take? What part of, does the other person share responsibility? Because it's never one-sided, not in friendships, not in divorce. When relationships fall apart, both sides ultimately have some, complicity in it, right? So when I look back on it, I understand the way Bethenny was feeling, and I wish I had done it better. So that was pretty much what the falling out was about.
Have you spoken with her at all since filming this new season?
No, I haven't seen her since this new season. I was in season 10. I show up a few times at parties and at a dinner party at Ramona's, and Bethenny's there. And we're, very cordial to one another. She'll ask me about my daughter because she knew my daughter, and my daughter was a baby at the time. But we're very friendly. There's no hard feelings. And I've said, publicly that I have a great deal of respect for Bethenny. And even before Bethenny accomplished all that she accomplished, when she was this, scrappy little thing trying to pay her rent, I always recognized how smart Bethenny is and how resourceful she is.
Right. It's kind of interesting, and I'm sure this has a lot to do, with editing, because as you said, it's a 60-minute show and people like to see the drama. So what we're getting to see a little bit of you so far, it's either the moment where you don't want to be so involved or the moment where you kind of speak up, kind of like with Sonia, calling Sonia an accessory to her husband. Do you have any regrets watching that back?
No, because, well, Sonia wouldn't let me, get a word in, right? So when I said to Sonia, you're doing this and you need to do this, and she was like, clip, 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 she wouldn't let me talk. But
Right.
what I was trying to say, and we've had conversations after, and she understood where I was coming from. She had stated that her husband used to embarrass her by and buy all these expensive things. Now, if you're embarrassed about it and you don't want to do it, and your husband is making you buy all of these clothes and buy this jewelry, then he's accessorizing you to accessorize himself, right? That was not a dig on Sonia. I was just calling it what it was. And I have been in a situation, I dated a guy who was all about image and show and used to buy these, very expensive Birkin bags for me, bags that I never would wear. They were heavy, they were uncomfortable. It just wasn't my style. He had a look that he liked all of his women to have. And so I used to always say to him, you accessorize me, so I accessorize you. So, that was all I meant by it, but it came out in a negative way because I didn't get to explain it to her, and she took it and ran with it.
When you add in alcohol, I think it heightens it a little bit.
Right.
After watching it back, obviously anybody at the party could have seen that, when you have a little bit of an open bar, things happen. And I think that reactions are just a little bit heightened. But
Right.
You kind of got the same reaction out of Dorinda when you spoke up about Luann having a drink as well.
Right. Well, so I was, first of all, initially I wasn't paying attention to what was happening. You could see I'm sitting off to the side and I sort of have this, goofy smile on my face because I'm having this cross conversation with someone else.
Right.
And then I focus in on that she's actually drinking vodka. And I was just trying to be supportive of her sobriety. It was my understanding that she's in AA, and I have friends who are in AA, and I understand that in AA, it's not, well, I'll have 1 or 2 drinks and I can control it. And when you're in AA, you don't drink, period. So I literally was trying to be supportive of her, and I was surprised to see that she was drinking because I thought she was doing so well not drinking, right? Cabaret took off. She looks beautiful, and in person, she's even more beautiful. So whereas our personalities don't necessarily mesh, I could be objective enough to say, wow, Luann was doing great. So I was questioning her decision to drink, and I felt like the other women were passively encouraging it.
Right.
And I'm very direct. I'm just a no BS person. I call it as I see it.
It adds to the storyline. It adds to the show. So maybe if they have a moment of weakness with Luann where she maybe kicks back too many, they can look at her and be like, oh, well, Luann's doing it again. Or it's almost like you're handing somebody the bullet. Right.
Well, that's the way I looked at it. I wasn't being, judgmental. I really thought I was being supportive.
Right. How was your experience with Tinsley and Leah? Leah came on kind of in the same situation you did. She was a newbie, except she didn't really know anybody.
Right. Well, the difference between the two of us, though, right? Leah is, an apple holder, right? And she's, so she's 100% in it. I was just sort of being invited day to day. I never knew when I was going to come back, if I was going to come back. It was, one of the girls would say, hey, we're having, a Halloween party, or we're having a tea party or something. Why don't you come? So that's how I was showing up.
Right.
But yeah, I did have the advantage of knowing these women where Leah did not. I'm in the same age group and Leah is much younger. So, I mean, God bless that feisty little spirit of hers.
She is a feisty spirit.
Yeah, but she jumped in there, and she had some pushback, but I think she's fabulous, and I think that she really developed a relationship with the girls as well.
Now, of course, I'm sure that these things have popped up in the media before, in the news. You've had some lawsuits before with your former housekeeper and your ex's kids suing you over your Park Avenue apartment. Of course, I think as you film and as we get to know you a little bit more on the New York Housewives, your Bravo fans are going to want you to answer for all of this.
Okay,
right?
I'm happy to. I'm happy to finally have a platform in which I can tell my side of what happened, as opposed to papers who were just in it for salacious headlines.
Right.
I'll start with the later one. The ex-boyfriend, they didn't sue me, I sued them. And it was because when I was with their dad, it was only two of the kids, actually. There were 5 children, and it was 2 of them that were executors of the estate. And when I was with their dad, we were buying an apartment together. We were splitting the cost of the apartment. We were splitting the renovation. And we broke up 2 days before the closing. And the closing was time of the essence. And all that means is that you have to close by a certain date. So I was legally obligated to close. And so I decided that I would buy the apartment on my own. And it was a co-op. So in co-ops, co-op boards have to approve everything. And they said they needed 6 weeks to get his name off of the apartment. And I didn't have 6 weeks, I had 2 days. So I had said to him, he and I were on very good terms. And I'd said to him, look, I'll pay for the apartment in full. And as soon as the co-op board approves the transfer, you just have to sign over the shares to me. So he owned the shares in something called nominee status. And all that means is that they're my shares in his name. I had power of attorney. I could call back the shares at any time. I indemnified him from any lawsuits in case there was problems with construction or anything. And it was ironclad. And in the legal document, it said that if I ever had to litigate to get my shares back, then he had to pay my litigation fees. And he passed away in an accident. And unfortunately, power of attorney died with him. And I presented his children with the documentation that showed their father had no investment in the apartment. He had no rights to it. It was not his. It was not theirs. And they wouldn't sign it over. They wanted me to pay them a lot of money to sign it over. And I waited a full year, and finally I sued them. And literally within days of me filing the lawsuit, they signed it over and they paid my legal fees. But of course, it's not what the papers wrote, right? The papers tried to make me sound like some gold digger stealing an apartment from, his children, when it was in fact, it was the opposite, right?
Yeah, because like you just said, that's completely
Right.
opposite from what I
It's not
read.
interesting to say that I sued his estate to get back the apartment that I paid for 100%, right? That's not an interesting headline.
Isn't that awful though, how that works? You can just take whatever story you want and put a spin on it, even if it's not it's any kind of trash magazine, anything like that. And it's
right. And then all the blogs pick it up, and it's, then when you Google me, I look like this horrible person.
It impacts your family, your daughter,
Absolutely.
yourself.
Oh, absolutely. And then with the housekeeper, and I've invited, people to, I said, please read the lawsuit that I had with the ex's estate. The unfortunate thing is the reporter had access to the lawsuit, or she wouldn't have known about it. So she had all the documentation, including my checks showing that I paid for the apartment in full, and chose to just leave it out of the story. And with the housekeeper, I encourage people to read my lawsuit, in which it states she stole over $50,000 from me and stole jewelry and handbags.
Wow.
So, I also had 2 affidavits from people who worked with her that, stating that she was a liar, that she never worked overtime. And it was a real political movement, because the groups that protested, she had 100 people protesting in front of my apartment. And the groups that protested were these groups who also protested in Times Square against Israel by holding up swastikas and burning the Israeli flag. They're the groups CARE and MAS and Justice for Palestine. And it's worthy of noting, I'm the daughter of a Holocaust survivor. So there was no coincidence that this is who protested in front of my apartment.
So this had to be terrifying.
None of this was included in the article, right? But they didn't think that was worthy. They just, suddenly this woman who we had parted ways and she wanted to come back and work for me and I would not take her back, suddenly decides to sue me for $500,000 claiming overtime, and she kept upping her claim, right? First she went from saying I owed her $1,400 to then saying I owed her $500,000. That was the story on that. So if anything, and what the papers did to me, I feel like they basically stoned the victim.
How did that work? Were you not able to were you just stuck in your house?
When they were outside, when there was like 100 of them outside, I didn't leave my apartment. But then afterwards, they were showing up, handing out thousands of flyers with my personal information, inviting people to come and harass me. And then I would leave my apartment and just ignore them. Unfortunately, the judge on the case was conflicted, which is also in my court filings. She's married to a woman who co-heads the Human Rights Department at NYU, and her wife co-heads the Human Rights Department with a lawyer from the group that was suing me, the Urban Justice Center. And the judge's wife also had a partnership with the Urban Justice Center in which they constantly would come and speak at NYU, and they would give internships to the judge's wife's students. So, and the judge's wife also wrote a handbook with the groups who protested in front of my apartment on how migrant workers can humiliate their employers. So you would think that this would be enough for the judge to recuse herself and that she's conflicted, but the sole arbiter to whether or not a judge is conflicted in the Second Circuit is the judge. So she refused to recuse herself. So I really had a big fight ahead of me, and
I think you can write more than one book. I think you have a couple of books to write.
I have a couple of books, and even the judge suggested that we go to mediation, and the magistrate judge asked both me and the housekeeper to take a polygraph test, a lie detector test. And I immediately jumped up and said, yes. And the housekeeper and her lawyers went off and they talked for a half hour and they came back and they said, no, we don't think they're accurate. So what does that tell you?
Of course.
Right.
Of course. Well, thank you for clarifying that and kind of clearing it up. I want to focus back on, the positive. You took your paycheck and you gave it to charity, right? 100%?
So it's interesting. I'm very new to Twitter and social media. So this was in a conversation I was having with one person, and I didn't realize it would get picked up.
Right.
What I'm doing is I want to start a match program where I want people to donate to animal rescue, and I will match their donation until I use up all of the money I've earned on RHONY and all the money I earned through doing cameos.
I think people don't realize there's so many shelters right now that are shutting down, so many animals that, are being put to sleep. It's, this really is, it means a lot to everyone.
Right. It's one of my great passions is animal rescue. And I've donated to the ASPCA for well over a decade, automatically every month on my credit card. An automatic donation goes through. And then at the end of the year, I try to do a nice big donation as well. But there's other organizations which I'm doing due diligence on right now as well. And as soon as I get a comfort level, which I right now I feel really excited about them, but I want to make sure the right amount of money is going to actual animal rescue as opposed to administrative costs. And then I will post the charity that I'm most excited to work with, and then that's when I'm going to ask everyone to match my, to donate, and that I will match their donation. Unfortunately, I think sometimes too much money goes to administrative costs and too much money goes to paying salaries. So that always bothers me. I'm a huge fan of the ASPCA, but that part of their organization bothers me. I think the CEO makes north of $700,000 a year, and to me, for a nonprofit, that shouldn't be the case.
Right.
But the work they do is very worthwhile, so that's why I've continued to support them.
That's awesome. So now kind of going back to filming the Housewives, because, you know, you're done this season, and I assume that you guys have the reunion coming up. I'm sure, and I don't even want to touch on it because I'm sure there's things that you can't talk about. But do you hope to film next season if they'll have you back?
I don't know. Maybe I'll come on as a friend.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was going to ask you. Would you ever hope to hold an apple? Or do you think it's too invasive, that kind of that level of bringing the cameras into your life?
It's not that I think it's too invasive, because I'm willing to be very open with people, but I think I may not be feisty enough.
Really appreciate you talking with me today. I was going to finish this off with one last question, but since you don't want the apple, I guess
what would my tagline be?
Yeah, what would your tagline be?
Everyone has a tagline.
And you're responsible for giving Sonia her tagline, so technically this is your second tagline.
Yes, thank you.
We need to give you credit for that.
Thank you for recognizing
Yeah.
that. My tagline would be, wait, I have to get him. I'm not a mean woman. I'm a woman of means.
That's good. Do you come up with this, or producer?
I came up with it, of course.
I like that. Well, I hope to see you in the future with an apple, even though that may not be what you want to do. Maybe eventually the Bravo fandom network back here, they'll get off your back and kind of support you through.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course. And thank you so much for talking with me today. You've been amazing.
My
and I hope that
pleasure.
you stay safe and stay healthy.
You too.
Bye, Elyse. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching Up and Adam.